Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Can you see the slides, the PPT?
Yes, we can see.
Okay. So now my topic is the next step after the delay is detected or a diagnosis is made. One needs to communicate the findings of your assessment or observation. And for that, one has to be in touch with the parents. Now, when we are talking about early intervention all these hours, yesterday and today, you've been hearing a lot of things about what is early intervention. It includes a stimulation program that you give to the parents, a home training program if the parents are coming from outstation HTP. Children might be advised a developmental therapy, physiotherapy if there is a motor delay. Speech therapy is advised when there is a language delay, articulation difficulty, communication difficulty. Sensory integration also is advised for children who have hyperactivity, sensory issues, especially with children who have autism and related sensory issues. Sometimes we also recommend as part of the ongoing process that further assessment and referrals might be advised. They might need to see other consultants. Other medical investigations might be advised. Sometimes one has to advise genetic counseling if the parents are planning a second child and you are suspecting a genetic problem. Then we also refer the parents for genetic counseling before the second pregnancy. But out of all these things, for me, the most crucial aspect of intervention is motivating parents. Once the diagnosis is made and once you have confirmed that there is a delay in development for whatever reason, motivating parents to do something about it is a very Herculean task, and that is what is ultimately going to benefit the baby. Parent counseling becomes an effective bridge between diagnosis and intervention. If you are making the parents aware of what the difficulties are, what the issues are, and if you are suggesting certain steps for intervention, there has to be some kind of convincing the parents and motivating them to get into action. Now, counseling has to be a process. It's not a one-time or a one-session activity. When you first talk to the parents about your findings, about your diagnosis, or not even a diagnosis, even if you're saying just that there is a delay and you need to do something about it, it doesn't end there. The counseling process has to be a continuous long-term process. From time to time, you need to talk to the parents, give them inputs, motivate them for continuous therapy and future action. You need to have a direct and frequent dialogue with parents. As therapists and as a consultant, sometimes we forget to talk to the parents. We directly handle the child and do our therapy, and we need do the needful. The child shows improvement. But if you really want the parents not to drop out, if you want them to continue the therapy for on a long-term basis, and most of our children, most of our babies need long-term intervention, frequent and direct dialogue with parents is part of the counseling process. When you're counseling the parents, you have to use different skills and techniques. Now, all of us are not trained counselors, right? We in our center, we have psychologists who do the follow-up counseling, or after an assessment, we do a detailed assessment of developmental skills, and we do a interpretive session where we do counseling with the parents. But not all centers have trained counselors or psychologists. But we need to keep a few things in mind when we are talking to the parents. It requires rapport establishment. It requires empathic listening. It requires you to hear with your third ear, because most of the times what parents are telling gives you a lot of clue about the child's difficulties. So it's not just training, but it's also an art. And a lot of us as consultants, as practitioners, have somehow developed certain skills of counseling. The counseling, one has to remember, has to be client focused and problem focused. You have to keep in mind what is the cultural background of the parent, what is their educational level, what is their financial status, what is their motivational level, and what is the actual problem that we are talking about. So you have to focus on the level of the parents as well as the type of problem that we are dealing with in the baby. Now, what is the purpose of counseling parents? Very often we start therapy, but we forget the component of parent counseling, and that's why we have been emphasizing this again and again. What is the goal of counseling the parents after you have arrived at a diagnosis or you have identified delays? The first goal is to provide information to the parents, because very often parents are groping in the dark. They don't know what is happening with the baby, what is the problem, and they have probably, as Madhvi madam said, googled, searched so much information which is sometimes relevant, sometimes not relevant, and we need to teach them to sift the correct information. We give them the accurate information about the diagnosis, about the baby's difficulties, about the intervention steps they need to take. And the aim of the counseling is to foster acceptance. Now, fostering acceptance is very easy to say, but it is very difficult to do. For parents, for us, it's just one of the so many delayed babies that we are seeing. But for parents, it's their only precious child. And we say that just accept him with his limitations or delays. It's very difficult. The fostering of acceptance comes only over a period of time and with a lot of positive feedback, a lot of guidance and action plan that you give to the parents, which eventually helps them accept the baby as it is. Because a rejection of a delayed baby, rejection of a child with special needs is a very common scenario. One has to suggest a lot of interventions in order to get the parents motivated. And when the parents come for an assessment, initially, even before the diagnosis is made, they are in a lot of distress. It is because they have suspected something with the baby and they are already worried. And even before the diagnosis is made, or even before you tell them there is a delay, the parents are already stressed. So your process of counseling after your diagnosis is aimed at relieving the distress, because it is a long-term intervention that they are going to need, but there is hope. You have to give them some kind of hope, and you have to help them reduce their stress by a lot of methods and counseling that you do, which we will talk about in the next few minutes. We have seen that when the parents come to us, they're already under tremendous stress. Lot of fathers are stressed, but we have seen that a majority of mothers, nearly 70% of mothers, have tremendous stress and diagnosable stress. They also suffer from a lot of depression sometimes, which goes undiagnosed. When the parental state of mind is not healthy, if they are anxious, if they are stressed, if they are depressed, it directly impacts child's cognitive, social, and behavioral development. This is proven by research that the direct impact on cognitive development, the IQ levels of a baby with a depressed mother are definitely lower, and this has been proven by research. So we need to address this aspect of parental mental state during the counseling. Features of effective help giving when you are trying to help the parents. Rapport building is very essential. You need to spend time with the parents. You need to listen to them first, because your intervention has to be addressing their concerns. Very often it happens that parents have come with the complaint of speech delay, and we are talking about sensory integration, occupational therapy. They don't relate the two. So you need to address the concerns of the parents, listen to their concerns, and relate your intervention to what their basic concern is. Rapport establishment and communication. You have to spend time with the parents, you have to talk to them, you have to listen to them. When you are giving them advice or guidance or suggestions, there has to be honesty in your communication. You cannot give them a very rosy picture when it is not possible, or you cannot give them a very dark picture. You have to be very clear in terms of what you are conveying to the parents. You cannot use big jargon. You have to make it in layman's term, and so that the parents can grasp what you're talking about. Understanding parental concerns, as I said, is the very crucial aspect. Unless you understand what they are worried about, you will not be able to address their anxieties. Sensitivity to family values and beliefs is also very important when you're talking of intervention. Very often we find that the decision-making person is the person who needs the counseling, not the parents. Very often it's mother-in-law or the father-in-law who is the decision maker. So in our counseling session, the focus will be the mother-in-law. We don't necessarily just address the parents. What is the values of the family, the beliefs of the family? That also you need to take into account and use that in the process of your counseling and intervention. One has to definitely avoid stigmatization when you're talking to the parents. It's very easy for us to label a child, but that label remains for life. So when we are dealing with infants and babies, I think we need to postpone putting labels as much as possible unless we are 100% sure of the diagnosis. And stigmatization should be avoided, because once you have stigmatized the child, it stays with him, not only within the family, but in the neighborhood, in the school. The stigma becomes a difficult thing to handle later on. Whenever you are talking to the parents, it is very important to have a hopeful diagnostic formulation. Even if you feel that the chance of improvement is very bleak, you cannot say this to the parent. You have to tell the parent what they have to do and give them hope. Very often very often meaning 100% parents ask us, ye acha ho jayega na, ye normal ho jayega na, my child will become normal. We cannot say, no, he will not become normal, even if you inside your heart know that. But you have to say, oh, yes, of course, it depends on your efforts. If you do efforts, it will show you results. You have to give them hope, and you have to give them a positive guideline. Defocusing in bad news, that is again a very important thing, because even if you feel the child will never be able to walk or never be able to talk like a normal person, if he has profound hearing loss or something, you have to not talk about what he's not going to be able to, but focus on what he will be able to do. Whenever parents realize that there is a delay or a problem with the baby, the parental responses are varied. Some parents respond with overprotection. The parents become so worried and concerned about the child that they don't let the child do anything. They don't let the child do anything on his own. They don't let him crawl. They don't let him on the floor. They don't let him touch things. They keep washing his hands. They keep sterilizing all his things. Sometimes there is too much overprotection. They don't allow him to socialize. They don't allow him to go out of the house. They don't allow others to handle the baby. There is another risk is overstimulation. We have seen parents who have been advised that this child needs so many therapies, or he needs stimulation, or he needs this. Parents make it their full-time project. Especially we have seen mothers who give up everything else, and the child becomes the focus, and 24/7 the mother is doing something or the other to stimulate the child. But this in the long run exhausts not only the mother, but also the child. The child also gets exhausted with overstimulation, and his brain shuts off. So overstimulation of a child is also not a good thing, because it cannot last. This kind of overstimulation process cannot last for long. Somewhere then the parent will give up. So one has to advise a slow and steady process of stimulation where the child is also not exhausted. We have seen mothers who do all kinds of therapy, five therapy sessions in different areas in one day, but that eventually does not really benefit the child. Sometimes we have also seen loss of spontaneity and natural enjoyment of the relationship with the baby. When the parent knows that the baby has a delay, we have to do so many things. They forget to play and smile and cuddle the baby. They just think of it as a job that they have to do. They have to do this, they have to do this, they have to take him to therapy, they have to feed him with this, they have to do exercise. And the loss of spontaneous, natural mother-child or parent-child relationship is sometimes lost. Lot of the times we find this attitude of avoidance where one parent starts avoiding the baby. Very often we have seen that either the grandparents reject the baby or the father rejects the baby, and the whole burden of care and nurturance falls on the mother. Sometimes the mothers also give up and they say, Abhi to kya, there is no use, and they stop going for therapy. They just stop everything and then give up on any kind of help that they could have got. Blaming is another very common parental blame game, where one parent blames the other one for the state of the baby. Either it is something prenatal they have done or postnatal, but the baby has a problem because of you. Each parent learns to blame, and this blame game doesn't help the baby at all. It only adds to the stress of the parents and indirectly affects the baby. There is a lot of guilt, especially in mothers. We have seen the mothers feel a lot of guilt about having given birth to a baby who is having difficult development. This guilt is about something that they have done wrong. Somewhere they have not given their enough attention to the baby, or something that they ate during pregnancy, or something that they did. And this guilt keeps eating them from inside, and that prevents them from giving their full to the baby. This kind of guilt, long-term guilt, often leads to depression. And very often we have seen that the depression in the parent, especially the mother, goes totally undetected because the whole focus is on the baby. The baby has arrived and the baby needs help, and the baby needs a lot of attention, and the mother's depression totally goes unnoticed for years. Divorce is another very common outcome of child with a when a child is born with a developmental difficulty, because very often, as I said, the blame comes on the wife. Because of her, the baby is like this, so the father tends to get married again, and there is the relationship ends and there is a divorce. Now, when we are talking of giving them a stimulation program or giving them a plan ahead, one has to weigh the aspects of family burden. When there is a special child in the family, it causes a lot of burden on the family. There is emotional burden. Accepting that there is a special child, accommodating your routine with the routine of the child. There is tremendous financial burden in terms of consultations, investigations, therapies. There is a lot of social burden because your socialization gets restricted. Your time is taken away by the caring of the child, and you can have sleep disturbance. Parents are so often deprived of sleep because of the erratic sleep patterns of the special baby. And there is physical burden of dressing, feeding, lifting, etc., especially when the baby has grown older. In the long term, the parents are also aging and the baby is growing older into a teenager, and sometimes they still need your help for dressing, feeding, lifting. It's a lot of physical burden for aging parents. A lot of these children are given special diets, and especially we have seen that Children with autism spectrum disorder are given very special diets. And these diets are so expensive and they need so many modifications in the daily cooking of the mother. And some of the things you have to order from abroad, they are not available here. And at the same time, balance the nutritional needs of the child. It's a Herculean task. It requires a lot of time, effort, money. So special diet needs also cause a lot of burden on the family. Unpredictability of disease also causes stress from time to time. Sometimes suddenly, after a while, the child develops seizures or suddenly develops some other complications of the illness, which again takes a lot of toll on the whole balance of the family and the parents. Uh, we have also seen that the parents have to commute a lot for therapies. They have to run from pillar to post for one therapy, one consultation, one. Luckily, fortunately, in our center, we have all the therapies, including speech and occupational therapy, physiotherapy, developmental pediatricians under one roof. But not all cities have this, and not all parents are fortunate enough to have it under one roof. So there is a lot of running around, commuting the parents have to do. We have also seen that sometimes families get displaced because we have seen that some children need special schooling, and in a place where they are staying, there is no special school. So the mother and the special child move to a city where there is educational facility available, whereas the other siblings remain in their village. So there is families are breaking down sometimes, and the families are displaced where father moves to another city for his job, whereas the mother and children stay in one place for the treatment. So a lot of family breakup and displacement occurs because all these things one has to keep in mind when you're dealing with parents, because for us it's easier said than done, because we always say that nahi nahi karo manage, ye karo, therapy to karo, idhar aa jao, udhar aa jao. But if you know that all these factors are taking their toll on the family, your approach will be a little more sympathetic and soft. When I said counseling, you cannot have this counseling, so many aspects of counseling in one go. So it has to be an ongoing process. Now, ongoing process, that is after you have made the first discussion about the diagnosis of the child, from time to time, you need to talk to the parents. Your aim of counseling the parents has to be empowering the parents. Empowering them by giving them actual action plan. When a person knows that, okay, I have a problem at hand, but I can do this. Once there is an action plan, the stress is less and there is a goal towards which they start moving, and that gives them a sense of empowerment. When they know that they have to do certain things, that empowers the parents. For empowering parents, we also have a lot of parent training programs in place. In our center, we train parents of autistic children on handling the children at home. We have modules over a period of 8 sessions. We train the parents, and parents can become very good co-therapists if they are given the right kind of training. Even for children, toddlers who are showing signs of hyperactivity, at that age, parental handling is the only intervention that we advise. And for that also, we have parent training programs for handling of toddlers who are showing signs of hyperactivity. This kind of training of parents gives them a lot of empowerment and positive energy. Very often we try to involve extended family in the whole process of intervention, because if the whole burden falls on one person in the family, especially the mother, it becomes too much. And then we suggest that share the burden. Let the siblings take over some things. Let the father take over some things. Let the in-laws do certain things. And we involve the entire family in the counseling process sometimes to have the burden shared by them. Providing an action plan, of course, gives them direction and hope. Encouraging adaptation to the needs of the child, that is also very important, because we need to make a lot of changes in our in our routine, in our household, in our family constellation, which will help the child accommodate in the usual routine of the whole family. Access to parent support groups is another very promising and empowering kind of a thing you can do. If you suggest to parents where and when they can join a parent support group, when they see other parents with children who have similar issues, that gives them some kind of sense of belonging. It makes them feel that they are not alone in this. And it also helps them share their ideas. They get a lot of ideas from other parents, and they can share their own experiences and useful ideas with other parents who can benefit from that. So giving them access to parent support groups, and if there are no parent support group, try and help parents create a support group amongst themselves, which makes a lot of things easier. It improves socialization for the special child, because otherwise there is no socialization opportunity for the special child. Sometimes it also helps parents get free time. Like one child is dropped at the other parent's house while the one parent is free for some time. So sharing and socializing and exchange of ideas is a very important aspect of parent support group. One more thing I would like to add here is that government is giving a lot of benefits for special children. There are insurance policies in terms of financial help. So whatever benefits government is giving, I think one needs to give that information to the parent, and they should be taught to claim the benefits. There is no harm in taking help of the facilities available which are given by the government, and claim the benefits, because a lot of parents ask us what happens to the child after us. So we need sometimes, not at the outset, but this is in the process of counseling over the next few years of child's development, as to what can be done, how to form a trust, how to claim insurance, how to make policies. And also sometimes parents ask us about marriage of the child, and so these are all long-term questions. They don't come up on the first session, but one has to do this kind of counseling from time to time to guide the parents. And at every stage in life, at every developmental stage, parents come up with new questions and new doubts and new help that they need, and one has to be available for that. When a child enters puberty, there are new set of questions. So this kind of counseling has to be an ongoing process. It has to be a psychoeducation process, and it has to be for the benefit of the not just the child, but the entire family unit. So this is some kind of a background that you should have at the back of your mind when you're talking to the parent. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, you can ask.